Today I'm speaking with Reggie Beloved. Reggie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Tim.
Absolutely. So good to see you here. And I'm going to start with a quick bio for Reggie. Reggie was born in Haiti, but he now lives in Atlanta, not far from me, about 30 minutes south of me. I'm here up here in Alpharetta. He is a police officer in Atlanta. He came to the US from Haiti in 1988 and joined the Army National Guard, and he even deployed to Iraq in 2003. His family background is Catholic and Baptist, and religion took center stage in his life based on the events of 9/11. He did, during his time as a Christian and in Iraq, complete reading both the Bible and the Quran, the whole thing, right?
Yes.
Both books. So at that point, I'm sure there's some interesting parts you're going to tell us about when you get to that part of your story. But I look forward to hearing, especially the Quran part of it, like how that affected your journey. He became an atheist in 2009, and he also started a group called the Haitian Freethinkers in 2012, which was 2 years after their massive earthquake and after the Pat Robertson comments, which I'd love to hear more about that journey. He is an activist and he focuses on highlighting and promoting secular concerns in the Haitian and other communities. So that's what I know about you so far, Reggie. If you could tell us more about yourself and maybe some fun stuff too.
Again, thank you for this opportunity, Tim. Yes, so I'm known on Facebook as Reggie Beloved, which is a play on my real name, Reginald Beloved, Bien-Aimé. Beloved is Bien-Aimé in French. So that's how that name came about. So for
Nice.
anybody who wanted to know. So yeah, so 44 years old, married, three kids, living in the Atlanta area, like Tim said. And I'm a proud, super happy atheist. Used to be a believer, and I love doing these kind of interviews. And I was inspired by your interview with Tristan Harris. To see if I can kind of talk to you, share my story, help people because I love doing that, especially in the, I guess, underreached, underserved community for those of us who are secular, but who come from different backgrounds, maybe non English speaking backgrounds. Because one of the challenges that I discovered very early on when I first became atheist is that there are so many resources that are English based that may not necessarily reach those who don't speak English as their first language. That I felt compelled to do something about it, and that, along with what happened in Haiti in 2010, encouraged me to eventually start Haitian Freethinkers, which is one of the world's few groups for secular Haitian people like me. So I love this, and I'm just grateful to be here.
Absolutely. Well, that's awesome. I'm so excited. I'll have the link beneath this video for the Haitian Freethinkers group. So if anybody wants to go check that out. Now, is that only in French or in Creole, or is some of that in English?
It's for primarily English speakers mostly. So what I'm trying to do eventually, one of my biggest projects is to make Creole language secular stuff. So all the stuff that me and you probably know we take for granted, get it out there in Creole, even if it's a small thing, and just get people familiar with it. My goal is to leave a legacy so that somebody in the future could peruse and say, "Oh my goodness, so I'm not alone." Even if I'm defunct, that there's something out there for the people who understand Creole and
Mhm.
English.
That's awesome. Very, very cool. We're going to have the link for that beneath this video. And we'd love to, at this point, to share your story if we could. If you don't mind, take us back to the earliest days. How did you get exposed to Christianity and what was it like in your family and your church? And I'll jump in with some questions here there, but looking forward to hearing your story.
Of course. So, like you said, I was born in Haiti, late 70s, and I remember very clearly that it was my uncle, which is my mother's younger brother, who introduced me to the concept of God. The first time I heard of the concept, I was getting in line to take the communion wafer. So that means that we were in the Catholic faith. So I was too young to understand differences. I'm just in line. And I remember my uncle said that if I did what we call désordre, mischief in Creole, they would find out. So don't go get in line to take the wafer unless you knew you were being good. So I literally was getting closer to the priest, and I said, "Oh my goodness, I'm always told that I was doing dessert. So let me not." I really thought the wafer was going to cut my throat and it exposed me as doing dessert. So, but my uncle was the first person who exposed me to the concept of God. And, even though I was young, I kind of got it that it was an omnipresent big brother type of thing, which had 360 views of whatever it is I'm doing at all time. Also, it was beneficent. It had my best interest in mind. So basically, it was a camera that's a parent.
Right.
That's basically what it is. So, okay, I roll with that. And just like most kids, I just kind of did what I was told. If you're familiar with the Catholic faith, there are these, I guess, traditions that you have to do as a child. So I did my catechism, I think it's called. So just followed the procession, but then the baby doc, baby Duvalier, the son, he got disposed of. He went to France, and that's when my family came to the United States permanently. At that time, eventually, my mother started to taking me to what I found out to be were Baptist churches or Protestant churches, and to me, it was kind of similar because everybody was talking about Jesus, but slowly but surely later on, I learned that there were differences.
You know,
Um,
did she attend the Protestant churches because there was just a lack of Catholic churches, or was she actually like switching sides, as it were?
I think she just wanted to be around Haitians. I think
Okay.
she probably was just invited. So, when you're an immigrant, which plays a big part in my background, you need to be with people that are from the same culture. And she probably got invited to this church. And I think that's how it started. And I think it was kind of like the same for her. It's all the same. It's Christianity. So
Yeah,
at
probably a
first
nice
she used
community there.
yeah, it was okay. I mean, we went to different churches. Some were more interesting than others, but as a child, I was made to go. And as I got older, I started to go on my own because I would befriend some of the kids there. Um, and at the time, I wasn't really serious into the theology. But what I did enjoy early on was going to Sunday school. And Sunday school was good because that's when you can actually interact. When you go to service, somebody's talking to you. It's a lecture. You can't ask questions. You can't interrupt. If something caught your attention, you can say, Pastor, but what about this? So I really like the interactive format of Sunday school. And as a teenager, like I said, I would go to different churches based on the invitations of my friends, and eventually I found one main church in North Miami, and that was like my main church. That's where I spent most of my time.
Was there a time in which you would say you gave your life to Christ as your personal savior?
Yes, I don't remember the date, but in that process of visiting different churches, I had some high school friends that had this pastor, Pastor George. I forget his last name, but he was from the Caribbean, and he actually came to my house, sat in my carport, and he really put pressure on me, stating that, listen, no, this is serious. Like, I'm very concerned about you. You might go to hell if you don't take this seriously. Like, he spoke directly to me, held my hand. It was like he had this conviction about the seriousness that I never really got from anybody else at that point. So after that talk, I remember going to my room and I had some chick tracks too. I remember I
Oh no.
flipped through the chick tracks, and then I voluntarily, without, I thought, direct pressure, said the Lord's Prayer, the sinner's prayer. And I remember getting on my knees. Nobody was around, so I accept Jesus as my Lord and Savior type of thing, because I wanted it to be sincere, you know. And so I kind of thought or expected something magical to happen. Really didn't. But I would say that that was the time that I said that I was Christian, not that I was
Mm.
participating in Christianity through my mom, but that I made the step by myself per what I've learned from Pastor George and what the Chick Tracks were saying.
If you had to at that point sort of explain that to somebody, or share your faith, what would you have said? Or the details? Like, what was it that in your mind took care of your sin issue and got you peace with God?
Well, I would say that I made it official because, at that time and still to this day, I like to make things official, as in to say, if I'm going to do this, I felt that I had enough information to make that choice, and I did it for myself. And so I didn't feel any different the same day or automatically, but I took it as serious as I could based on what I did know. I was going to try to be the best person that I could. so that I can not really go to heaven, but just I just was in that state where I was committed to please Jesus, to do the right thing all the time. And I started to orientate my life that way.
What was the place of Jesus's his violent death and his resurrection? Like, what did that mean to you? What was the purpose of that to you?
At that very moment, that young person me, not too much because I took it for granted that at the time I didn't know too much about other religions. I just kind of took it for granted that that's how things were. Yeah, the gory films about his death was something I just took for granted. That's how he died. He died for my sins, etc. I wasn't super serious about like the the event as I just kind of took it for granted that this was done for me and I accepted the gift. I just kind of took it for granted to be honest with you
Mm.
at that time.
But it was like a sense that he was your substitute. He was taking the death that you deserved.
That's what they say, but I've always had a positive view of God and Jesus as like those those particulars in the story wasn't as important as I have someone that's looking out for me, something that's with me, what they call a personal I had a personal relationship with God, you know, so that now I not only am guaranteed a seat in heaven, but I can just be the best person that I can be because I have now that guarantee that my place in heaven was secure. I think that was more of my focus at the time.
Gotcha. But you would have said that it's his death and resurrection that brought your salvation.
Yes, because that's part of the process. You accept the gift that was given to you at the cross way back then, about 2,000 years ago.
It's interesting how you said that you didn't feel anything magical. I think sometimes we do get sold that sense that there really is something that's going to come in and transform you. And it's weird though. I think for a lot of people, whether it's preached this way or just they experience it, there's a lot of us that kind of feel after the fact that there's this concept of the Spirit's going to come in and like you can get saved officially, but that the Holy Spirit's going to come in, and that could be a separate step later. Whether you think it's because of the just the timing, you have to mature in your faith, or the speaking in tongues issue, or whatever it is, but that there are things that are going to cause you to have a deeper relationship with Christ through the Holy Spirit, and that when that hits, whenever it hits and however it hits, that suddenly you're like taken to this next plateau, this next level of spirituality, and it's so fascinating. And I remember for me, there was a concert, a Christian concert, where I felt just this overwhelming sense. And it was probably just the fact that the music is so loud, but you just kind of sense this tingling down your spine, and you think, is that the Spirit? Is that the next level of spirituality? And of course, when you're at missions conferences and revival services, they're encouraging you to be like, look, this is the mountaintop experience. And when you're done this conference, you're going to feel like you're going down to the valley, but you don't have to. You can stay close to God, even though the conference is over soon. And that sense you're going to get deeper and deeper in your relationship with Christ, and you can kind of stay on the mountaintop with Him, even every day. Every day, it's interesting how it feels like it suddenly gets slowly but surely more magical, or at least more intense.
That's a perfect description. And I have two instances of what you're talking about that I guess I kind of expected when I first became a Christian. I had a classmate named Herman who went to school in Tallahassee, and he came back and unexpectedly he became a Christian, but of this particular sect. When I met with Herman, I was surprised because I would have never seen it coming that he would become such a serious believer. So I went to his church, and I'll never forget. It was in like the not Doral, but like Miami Lakes area in Miami, for those who are familiar. So he described that feeling of having the Holy Spirit as having like a fire in your belly, and I just kind of wanted to experience that. So again, we got in line, and I remember people were prayed on, and they would fall on the ground. I don't remember if they were twitching or anything, but my turn was coming. So when my turn came, they put their hand on my chest and they were speaking to me. I remember smelling the breath of the guy, and then when it was time to lay down, I was nudged down like nothing was happening. So I kind of played along, so I could feel the Holy Spirit, whatever. And they covered me with this little purple cloth type of thing, and I just remember thinking like, "Okay, where is it? Anytime now." And I never felt the fire in my belly, and so I kind of wanted that experience to see, like, oh my gosh, like something wrong with me because I don't feel no fire in my belly, but I'm just trying to do my best. So that was one experience. The other experience had to do with speaking in tongues, which I thought was a very interesting and at the time as evidence of the supernatural claims of the Bible, right? So I was in church at New Vision and I saw a young lady start to speak in tongues for like, I won't say, well, no reason. Like she just started to speak in tongues. And then I went to another a prayer group, and Evelyn, this lady I really look up to, she started speaking in tongues. So I'm seeing this and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a thing. I've never had it happen. But later on, when I read it, in the Bible, how like, there's different gifts, etc. I thought, well, maybe that, I just didn't have that gift. So, but then I learned about glossolalia, I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. And the scales fell from my eyes. So it's a phenomenon that's understood. And it just some people experience it, some people don't. And some people just straight fake it. And there are lots and lots of fakers out there. So I didn't know that at the time though.
Yeah, I bet. I'm sure there are a lot of people faking it. It seems like it's just culturally. I mean, we learn so much in as Christians, especially just the way to pray, the kind of verbiage that you use, and it's fascinating to me how much we picked up on, as especially when you're in it as a child, and it's just part of your psyche, as part of your worldview. When you were at that stage where you were really getting serious about the Lord, did you feel like you had a personal relationship with Him, where you were talking to Him and sensing His guidance?
I sure did. I did a lot of things that were personal because I believed in the a relationship that's not meant to be shown outwardly just to like prove a point type of thing. So I would buy food for people. I considered having homeless people stay in my little studio because what stuck in my head was like the saying how when I was in jail you came to see me, when I was naked you clothed me, and stuff about how you made me nice to a stranger and little do you know that could be an angel type of thing. So I took those things really, really, really seriously. So I remember when I would take a shower, I would hear the voice of God. When I would run, I would hear the voice of God. But then one day I said to myself, how do I know? This is key to everybody. I would encourage believers to try this. I said to myself, how do I know if the voice that I'm hearing is me or God? I used to ask myself questions like, the accent of God? Why is it always a male voice? Why couldn't God have a Jamaican accent or a deep voice? So later on, I discovered that God was kind of me. Although at the time it felt like we had different minds for the sake of it. But I think it's kind of like your conscious, like if you feel guilty, when you have conscious, sometimes we kind of self-talk to ourselves and I think that's what it really was, but at the time, I would say that it was God, and it's usually something positive that I was, uh, uh, the message I was receiving, or something making me feel kinda, like, guilty for something that I was thinking or doing, and that's what I considered God at the time.
Mm. And when you gave your life to Christ with your family already being religious, did they rejoice in that? Or were there any religious differences or theological differences where they were upset about that? How did the relationships and the conversations go with your family with regarding religion?
That's a good question. My stepfather, he stayed Catholic. In fact, he never went to church with us when my mother was going to those Protestant churches. And I never came out to say to my mom, "Hey, mom, I accepted Jesus as my Lord and Savior on my own." I just kind of did it privately. And so my mother didn't know about my official conversion ever. Everybody just kind of assumed that you were some kind of Christian because the only other option that we had, especially as Haitian people, were um practitioners of voodoo. And that was like the big negative elephant in the room that, nobody would talk about, but I wasn't exposed to voodoo. So I really didn't have too many options. So it was really, you're some kind of Christian. It just kind of was taken for granted. And my mother was just happy that I was going to church on my own without being forced. So I started to take interest in the religion on my own without having conversations. Because to be honest with you, at the end of the day, I discovered my parents were what they call, well, especially my stepfather was a CEO, Christian and Easter only. He doesn't really go to church. He'll never talk about it. There was no talk about the Bible on his end. My mom just went. She would get an emotional boost for the week just to kind of survive. And that was about it. There was really no talk about it. So I was, I think, probably the more serious believer at some point in my teenage years in the
Gotcha.
house.
Interesting. One thing I like to ask about is when you were really developing your relationship with God, there's always this push in church and youth group and all that for us to have a personal quiet time with God. What was it like for you behind the scenes? Not, where everyone's looking and seeing you raise your hands and speaking in tongues and testifying, but just like you privately with God, alone in your room with an open Bible, talking to God. Maybe lights out, you're just praying. What's it like with your quiet time with God?
That's a good question. I It's been a while since I was in my religious mind, and in my high time when I was religious was, I would say, 16 to like 22. So if I remember correctly, it's just praying, praying. I remember praying for the best for the world. I, when they talk about prayer, one of the things that it was explained to me was that you want prayer to be sincere, you want prayer to be positive, you want it to be not self-serving. So I would pray for things like world peace, whatever ailments were happening in the world. So if I was in that state, um, today I would be praying for the current stuff that's ailing the world that everybody knows about, the Ukraine situation, Israel. That would be my quiet time. I didn't have a time where I was actually reading the Bible by myself. That was not part of my routine. That was not part of my tradition. I think I took it for granted that I had enough knowledge about God, Jesus, and the Bible by just going to church. And I was really wrong about that. In fact, I remember very clearly that the Bible to me seemed to be such an unapproachable book, as in like it's complex, that I needed someone like a pastor to kind of explain it to us. So they made it seem like a fetish, it really seemed like something that was complex, but in reality it's not. So I'm a Miami Dolphins fan, and when we got Jason Taylor, I don't know if you follow football,
No.
when he was a rookie, he was introduced as someone who was homeschooled, or his parents made him read the Bible, or he read the Bible or something like that. And that was the very first time that I even thought that a person could even indulge in reading the Bible. But at the time, I didn't see it as a necessity. Certainly was not pushed upon me to do so, because when we go to church, I felt that I got all the information that I needed. I felt like I knew enough of the basics of Christianity to lead my life, which was to be a good person and to eventually spread the gospel. That was probably the most pressure that I got from my church, to kind of share the good news, which I tried to get into, but I was having a hard time because I really felt that, people's private thoughts on religion were their own. In fact, if I were to have a conversation with you, let's say if we just met, I may sheepishly say, "Hey, have you been saved, or have you considered the Lord Jesus Christ?" But I don't know. I just felt like that's kind of intrusive. But so that would be the closest that I got. I didn't really have personal time beside just personal prayer, and most of my prayer was to wish good things for the world and to want the best for humanity.
It's interesting with what you're saying about the Bible being sort of like you had to have someone sort of interpret it for you, like the pastor, because I had the very opposite messaging from my church that like you have to be in the Bible, you have to be reading it, you have to be like God wants to reveal stuff to you. But even though that was the message, which was sounds like it was different from what you experienced, there was still the practical reality of what you're saying, like that you get this sense that there are these men of God who've been studying the Bible for decades, who can read it in the ancient languages like Hebrew and Greek. And you just think, and these guys have read thousands of theology books. And you get this impression that even though the Bible's supposed to be completely approachable, you're supposed to just be able to read it as a layperson, and any child of God can read it. It's like his love letter to you. At the same time, you would pick up these messages from, in my experience, from pastors and listening to people on Christian radio, kind of saying, "I know you Christians have heard that this verse is to be interpreted this way, but I want to give you some information about why that typical interpretation is so wrong. If you could read it in the Hebrew, you'd know that that can't be the way to look at this. Or if you knew this about the ancient world, if you knew this about the Corinthian church or about the Galatians, whatever, about the church in Laodicea, if you knew what they were like culturally, you would interpret that phrase differently. And so I got this real strong sense that you have to kind of be really highly educated in terms of like the question of what's the context. That mattered so much to us, to the point that like you almost felt like you couldn't really be a good Bible interpreter unless you either knew the ancient languages, or were reading someone that did and was explaining it to you, and unless you could get the background of that, of the specific culture. And it almost felt like a, like there's this threshold of like, if I could ever get to that point where I could just be a really good Bible interpreter. It was like a, use the word fetish. I think it's a good word for this too, like a fetish of being an advanced Bible interpreter. And until then, I'm kind of a novice. I can kind of speak generically of like, we should just love the Lord and love the gospel and love our salvation. But if you're going to really rightly divide the word of truth and be a good expositor, you really have to get to this deeper level of interpretation. And you could still be wrong, because you could have gone to the wrong school where they didn't interpret the Hebrew correctly for you. You could read the wrong book, and you could, it's like you have to read 10, 50, 100 books before you can really get a balanced perspective. And of course, what happens though is you don't get a balanced perspective. You get a wide variety of people as you read all these different interpretations saying, I'm right, no, I'm right, no, I'm right, no, I'm right. And you're left thinking, I don't know which one's right. And it's just it's a fascinating perspective where you feel like it's so approachable and yet so mysterious, and such a, like a bridge you're not sure if you've ever crossed or not, where you're actually a good Bible interpreter. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And to add to what you're saying, I think for me, before 9/11, not only did I not have the same interest in reading the Bible, I was simply too busy. Once 9/11 happened and all these distractions were taken away from me and I was deployed, I was facing death. And I began to really ponder, like, you know what, there's a really good chance I'm going to die. So why not just dedicate my life to my time to reading the Bible from the beginning? There's no excuses. So I started from the beginning, and on top again of what you said, I said to myself, you know something, that's a novel idea. And I told myself, I'm going to format my brain, erase everything I've been told about this book, and re-download it as if it was a piece of software. And that's key, and that's what I encourage everybody to do, especially believers. If you could try to remove all the things you were told and try to kind of have a fresh, new perspective on it, that will make all the difference. And for me, that's what led me to become an atheist, and that's what happened. So I definitely agree with you.
Hmm. Can you tell me what happened to prompt you to read the Quran?
So I started reading the Quran because a buddy challenged me. We were at Barnes and Nobles, I'll never forget. And he said that there's an angel on my left and right shoulders. So I started reading the Quran. By that time, I had a couple of copies. I had the Yusuf Ali version, and I did the same thing that I did with the Bible, which is to start from the beginning. And it took me a little bit over a year, and I was able to read it, made notes on it, and I kind of came to him to tell him what I found, which was that the Quran is not what he claims to be, which was the Word of God, the updated and last revelation to mankind by the Prophet Muhammad. And I told him that it's very clear to me that the Quran was basically Muhammad's attempt to copy the old messages to the Jews and the Christians, and with his own additions. And basically, I told him that if he knew what the old revelations, supposed quote unquote, were, he would see that Muhammad was just kind of taking clippings from the Christian Bible and the Jewish Bible and just making his own stuff. But how Islam is explained to people was that it's just the last revelation. But he
Right.
wasn't trying to hear it, and so that was that as far as my explanation to him of what I found the Quran is and Islam is in general.
Mm. It's interesting. I get comments on the channel, of course, all the time, but I mostly get comments from Christians who are saying, Jesus is real and the Bible is the truth, etc. But I do occasionally get a Muslim saying something, and it often will go something like this: "You're right. Christianity is the false worldview. It's a false belief system. But if you could just read the Quran, if you could just understand Islam, it is such a beautiful belief system, and it's such a beautiful book. And it's fascinating how they're so steeped in this stuff. And you shake your head because I'm like, I've read a lot of the Quran, and it is just unbelievable. Like this book is clearly not divine. It's clearly just as garbagey and false as the Christian worldview and the Christian scriptures, and yet they think it's the most beautiful thing ever. I end up just shaking my head, and I'm like, I don't know what to tell you, but I've read some of your book. It doesn't appeal to me at all. There's nothing in it that says this is clearly from a God. This sounds a lot like the same stuff we're dealing with in the Bible, meaning this is written by tribal men who are misogynistic and patriarchal and willing to commit slavery and genocide in the name of their God. Like that doesn't appeal to me. That doesn't. There's no part of this that is redeeming, and it's fascinating though how they think it does. I just shake my head every time I see it. Anyway, so in your journey, what was it like going to the point of like reading through the Bible and reading through the Quran and starting to say you've got some deeper questions? And like, what were those deeper questions? What were some of those early seeds that made you think maybe your worldview was not correct?
Being from that I'm a hate from the Haitian background, what we're famous for is being the first nation founded by rebellion of slaves. So slavery was inherently wrong to me, and there was nothing that you can say to me to kind of apologize for that. So slavery was in the Bible, but what I didn't know was that God ordained it. God told the Israelites to make slaves of other people. That was a that was a no-go to me. On top of that, God promoted, did violence, and killed people. When I was younger, one of the first rules that you learned was thou shalt not kill. And it was so horrible to see the behavior of Yahweh in the Bible. So when I was in Iraq, I stopped around Isaiah when I was reading the Bible. Then I went back to the United States and I asked for an audience with my pastor. And Pastor Ronald was kind enough to meet with me, and I really wanted to understand or know why it is that this frankly disgusting, barbaric, savage behavior was never discussed in my time in church. Because to me, it played a part in my reality in the Iraq war because people were still fighting over the same themes, these same regions. And so it was then that I found out that Pastor Arnold said that he focused more on the New Testament. He focused more on Jesus. He didn't really either know or really was familiar with the genocide of Canaan. And that's when like I was like, oh my goodness, I thought a pastor was like a doctor. You do not become a pastor until you are knowledgeable, you went to theology school or whatever. But I was taken aback, but I was thankful for his honesty because I was like, wow, so I can go ahead and read by myself. By that time, I had a lot of tools, Google, Wikipedia, you name it, and I just kept reading. And eventually, I stumbled upon a list of contradictions, which I verified line by line. Some of which I discovered myself by just reading the text, but it was the first time that this website, I discovered other people had criticized the Bible and they've already done the homework. So I wasn't doing anything new. So the more I found critical resources of the Bible, the more it led me to see that a lot of people saw the flaws of the Bible just like I did. So what led me to start questioning were the slavery, the genocide, which I still have a major issue with, and other stuff. Patriarchy you mentioned, and it's just a really, really grotesque book. In fact, I would tell believers that if the Bible was made into a movie, they would not let their children watch.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a very terrible book. Now, I want to touch on the Quran for a little bit only because like I'd say because I read the book that Muhammad did have an opportunity to improve upon the Bible by just taking out the bad stuff, the slavery, um the misogyny and all these things, but he chose to put that in there because I'm not saying that it benefited him, but he was a man of his time. So he talked about the things that was, his surroundings, what he knew. So like you said, it's not really impressive or different really, but you can't tell that to the Muslims who believe that. But he had the opportunity to improve. If he did those things, the one thing I would say is that the Quran is actually a lot less violent than the Quran, but I mean than the Bible. However, since it's kind of like the same themes, a lot of same characters, you end up with the same issues. So those are the things that really concern me.
Mm. It's fascinating how many Christians, I think, either don't read those scriptures and don't know them, whether they're the pastor or just the layperson. They don't know them, or they do some kind of mental gymnastics to explain it away, where they just say we focus on the New Testament. And it was interesting. I had a conversation with a pastor of a church, like he was a real pastor of a church I attended, pretty much the last church before I became an atheist. But I asked him to dive into these topics with me, like how do you deal with the genocide and the land theft and the slavery and the stoning, the child brides? How do you deal with this stuff? And he said, pretty much, he said, there's two different ways to see it. Number one, this happened, but God didn't really want it to. But this is just a recording of like people trying to use God to defend it. But God didn't want this stuff. Or he'd say, or it just straight up didn't happen. They just wrote it and it's not real history. And I said, well, what if it had happened and your God had really commanded it? And he said, oh, I wouldn't believe in that God. I would not believe in that God if a God really commanded genocide and land theft and slavery and all that stuff. And it shook me to think how much they're willing to jump through all these hoops to preserve it. It's like the majority of humans, as far as I know, who've said we're a Christian, the majority of humans have said that stuff is part of actual history, and God did command it. And the way that they're jumping through hoops in the last, couple 100 years perhaps, or even more recently, it's astounding, but it's like they're trying to cling so much to just find some way to say, I have to have my God. I have to have my Jesus. I have to have some kind of afterlife and a divine purpose. And they can't, it's like their conscience is being sensitized to things like genocide and saying, ooh, I can't defend that, but I still have to have Yahweh and Jesus. So how do I merge them? How do I keep both together? And so they come up with these constructs to make themselves feel, better and feel like it's acceptable. But you realize when you really read the text, that's exactly what it says. The straightforward reading is he said it and they did it. And it was horrible. And it may have reflected some aspect of their actual history. But regardless, it's amazing how much people want to defend it. But even if, to me, as I began to think through those same issues, my thought was whether it happened in real history or not, and whether Yahweh really commanded it. It says He commanded it. It says He wanted it. Are you really comfortable with a book that says that? Whether it says it, whether it's true or not. The reality is that if there was a God who really didn't want genocide and land theft and slavery to be part of His people's morality, he could have at any point jumped in and said, hey, 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 hold up. You're writing this book in my name. You got it all wrong, guys. You got it all wrong. You cannot write this book in my name and say I'm okay with this stuff. We got to clarify that right up front. He never did. The only clarification is it happened and he was the one that commanded it.
Yes, so that's when I learned about the concept of apologetics.
Yeah.
As I became more knowledgeable, I faced the crossroads. So how can I, with a straight face, tell someone to become a Christian knowing what I know? I couldn't because I, at that point, reached a point when I said, what if I meet someone who is just as knowledgeable as me? I believe very deeply in not lying. If you were to ask me the same question, I would say, yes, God did command the Israelites to kill the Canaanites. That's true. And if you say, "Was is that right or wrong?" I'd say, "Well, that's wrong." That would have been me because I didn't want to have to apologize. It was supposed to be the sublime book, you know, and it's so atrocious, so vile, so savage, so messed up. I mean, I almost want to curse. It is the worst thing. In fact, I don't think I've read anything worse than the Bible, to be honest with you, as far as pure treachery. I think the only thing that can rival it is Bartolomew de las Casas book on his his time with the Caribbean. But it's a very horrible book, and I think people, first of all, they haven't read it, so they don't know what we're talking about. Number two, those who know, they apologize for it. And number three, I basically ask them, if somebody else did that to your group, would you be okay with it? And that's what makes 9/11 so important. The story that we were told was that some foreigners, some Muslims came over and they struck these towers because their God told them so. So if that's not good, then how can Christians say, well, the Israelite did this because their God told them so? I mean, you literally have an example with Samson committing what is essentially an act of terrorism by pushing the towers and having the Colosseum collapse on him. So you have every negative thing that you can think of that is exemplified in the Bible, but some people cannot bring themselves, like you said, to say that this is wrong. And the difference was I was able to be honest with myself first and say, I could not promote this because I'm anti-slavery, I'm anti-misogyny, I'm anti all the things that I think most of us agree are bad. So why would I need to promote this, defend this? I didn't want to do it. And so once I found out there was something called atheism, I said, yeah, that's me. I don't believe anymore. I couldn't do it. You can still be a good person. That has nothing to do with your morality. You can still be good. You can still be whatever. And so that's just, I think, the best path for not only me, but for most people. If you're a good person, keep being good, keep being charitable, keep being whatever. You don't need the theology. You don't need to apologize for these atrocities. Just say that, just call a spade. And that's what I did.
I was curious, did you ever have in that process a sense of struggling with the idea that you had a relationship with God, you'd spoken with him in prayer, you'd maybe sensed his presence, sensed him opening doors. How did you deal with the idea of saying intellectually, this doesn't sound right as a worldview, but at the same time, like I have seen the goodness of the Lord. I've tasted and seen that the Lord is good. I've seen him do things. I've seen him talk. I've heard him talk to me. I've seen things I can't explain. There's definitely something out there. How did you relate to the experiential part of deconversion?
At one point, I was very committed in being kind of like a prophet sort of for God, but in retrospect, I think it's my morality, it's my sensitivities talking to me saying, I thought I was supposed to say that the Bible was lying on God because God being good would have never done these things. So I took it as a personal mission to kind of vindicate God about the lies that's been told about him. But really that was me. I think that was me saying like, no, this is this is wrong, but it's written and a lot of people believe it already. So it's very exhausting to try to go to believer after believer, me not having a platform, me not having a degree. Like, who is this guy? You know. But if you ask the believer, like, hey, the believers, if is slavery wrong? They'll say, yeah. Is genocide wrong? Yeah. Then we most of us are already in agreement. But my experiential relationship aspect with God was if I were to say, well, God told me that the Bible is wrong, I would have really no footing because somebody would be rightfully asking, me, like, how do you know if the voice that you're listening to is God? I couldn't prove it because for most people, they'll point to a book. I didn't have a book. It was just my word and the relationship that I had with what I thought was God and me explaining it to that person. So I had a very difficult time, but like I said, that was that little moment in time when I was trying to do the right thing and trying to apologize in a way for God for being misrepresented. And that would have been the time if I was going to be introduced to a different religion that aligned with my values, that would have been the time. But that didn't happen, and I realized I didn't have to apologize for anything. My views are my views. My morality is mine, and I think most of us believe in all the same good things. Um, but yeah, so that would be my answer to your question.
So it sounds like progressive Christianity didn't really capture your attention too much.
I didn't I didn't meet progressive Christians until later in my journey because I just didn't know, like I would meet what I call t-shirt and jeans Christians. Those that were not so buttoned up, I met those guys later, but that time I knew too much. The same Those same cool people, they're good people, still did not denounce the genocide in Canaan. They would still not denounce slavery. They would still not denounce misogyny, you know? Um, but how about this? I learned from Jews why Jesus was not the Messiah using the Bible. So how can me and those Christians have a conversation when the fundamental cornerstone of their religion has been proven to me without a doubt that he is not the Messiah? Those are the kind of things that I want to talk to people about, and they would not hear it because it literally shook their very foundation. So I was meeting people every day who are not really serious about the religion. What they were serious about is holding on to their version of their God that they knew what felt comfortable with, and that was always causing them problems. So people were not about truth; they were about what it is that made them comfortable, and that's basically how it still is today.
So it's amazing to me how we all end up coming at things from all these different angles, but we come very, very much to the same conclusions. Like this just doesn't sound right. There's so many ways in which this just doesn't sound right. So as you began to get to the final version of your faith journey, and you're getting to the point where you're actually admitting to yourself, this doesn't sound right. What was like the last week or the last day like when you just said, "Wow, like that's it, I'm done. I don't believe anymore." What were the final moments like for you?
The final moments were it was a meetup in South Florida that I met with some 3 or 4 young people my age. I think we met at a Starbucks outside in South Florida, um, because I wanted to. I've learned so much about the people that have critiqued the Bible. I discovered the the atheist community of Austin, and I was like, "Ooh, like because atheism was always seen as negative, even though I don't know where I got that negative vibe from, but like I never engaged atheists before in real life. So after that meetup, I discovered that first of all, we didn't even really talk about religion. They were talking about whatever else that interested them, mostly um, cosmology, astronomy, just chilling, just being regular. And that's when I discovered that, man, these are just regular people who are just living their life. So I remember very clearly after that meetup, this was in 2009, I put that checked in that I went to the meetup and I said to myself, oh my goodness, I am committing social suicide because at the time I was single and I was still searching, and I became such a malcontent a little bit because I was so passionate, so knowledgeable that I said to myself, I will never find someone who shared my passion, shared my knowledge. But I checked in on Facebook, and then the person who first liked it later on became my wife, Valerie, and that was very important to me. And then I went back to my studio and I said, you know what? I prayed my last prayer. I said, God, I'm still here. If you want to talk to me, I'm here. But I can't say honestly, that I still believe. And if you want to reach back to me, I'll be here. And I said, okay, I don't believe anymore. So that was it. That was when I said, I understand what an atheist is. Those are my people. I don't believe. I could not tell somebody, well, I could not say to myself first that I believe this based on the things that I've learned. And I definitely couldn't share my faith with somebody else trying to convert them to Christianity. So I left. So that's when I became an atheist.
Was it a shock to your system at all to be like, "Wow, who'd have thought I would have landed here?" Or was it like a relief, like, Oh, this makes sense. Like, what was the psychological impact?
It was a relief, and then the more I found community, it became like the best thing ever. Like everybody was so kind. I was meeting and interesting people from different backgrounds. And what I loved about the secular community, they were all so knowledgeable. You know, I'm always learning still to this day from them. I met Aaron Ra in Darwin's Day in 2011.
Nice.
I went on to meet James Randi. James Randi came down to South Florida. Um, so many people, and I've had such a good time. And the secular community is just so awesome, so welcoming, so diverse, and also so smart. And and they care, I think, all about the right things. And it was just such a big relief, you know. So um, that's how I would describe it.
How has your family treated you when you began to talk about it openly?
My mother thought I was crazy because again, when I came back from Iraq, I was like, as they would say in the religious world, I was on fire for Jesus, but but warn people like, hey, this stuff is crazy. It's serious because our actions is going to have an impact on world affairs. And I think it's having an impact on world affairs right now because there are people who expect Armageddon. And if we can avoid it, I thought that that would be everybody's goal. I really used to think that people wanted peace. I thought that people in general wanted unity. And so I thought, had the opportunity to see what the future may lie if we did the right thing by reading Revelations by the time I read to Revelation. But Revelations, when I read it, really gave me the sense that it doesn't matter what we do, this will happen. And my goal was to prevent that. So I was talking about it, and my mother was like, "Man, you better stop. You sound crazy." That type of thing. And to me, it was just like her lack of knowledge because she didn't read. She didn't know what I'm talking about. And every time I would bring up these important questions in Sunday school, the people are barely interested. You know, or most people come to church because of tradition. They were made to go. They don't want to read. They don't want to get into it. And so, yeah, that was my experience.
Did anybody write you off or like just say I can't be your friend anymore?
Yes. So Ryan, the Muslim guy, you know, once I told him about Islam, that kind of affected that did affect our relationship. Um, this other guy from my church, Marcus, he told me I would never forget how, just like you said, like after you taste the sweetness of Jesus, how can you reject them? And it's kind of like because I know better, you know. This is, you know, we were wrong, and I'm just telling you what is right. And so he wrote me off. So I haven't spoken to him too many times. You know, I went to Pastor Ronald's house. I tried to bring up my concerns. It wasn't it wasn't taking root. So I've had different people that I've told what I've learned, and it definitely changed the dynamic of our relationship. My auntie, you know, and then, you know, I would also ask them, like, hey, you know, like, I did my homework. Did you do your homework? Like, do you know what I'm talking about? And they're like, nah, they're not interested. As long as they hear the word atheist, it's kind of like it's just bad. So
Yeah. Interesting. It's so interesting how that works, just the dynamics, and I know for me, when I was at the tail end of my journey out of Christianity, as it really hit me that atheists sounded more rational and atheists sounded like they had better information, and they were putting the pieces together better about history and about understanding what happened with early Christianity and early Judaism and Second Temple Judaism and just what happened to get this religion off the ground. As I began to really put those pieces together, it's a weird thing, but you realize they're just the Christians aren't your people anymore. You want them to be your people. They've been your people this whole time. They're the people you respect and you admire. You see them as your confidants, your friends, as the people that educate you. And all of a sudden, you realize like your education of me has come to a complete end because I've learned so much more than you, and you won't listen. You won't listen to new information, and I don't trust you because it looks like you're trying to pull something over on me, and it sounds like you're trying to justify genocide in the name of your God. And it's a fascinating track. But I've said this before. in other interviews, but it's weird how like deconversion for me was like this one main track. It was simply, is Christianity mythology or not? But there were these other tracks that kind of became more important at times, such as how do Christians respond when you bring new information to the table? And that wasn't enough to deconvert me because I never associated a Christian's attitudes or actions as reflective of God. It's like if a Christian can go commit murder, a Christian can commit adultery. That does not make God not God. That just makes them a bad Christian or a bad person. That again, God's eternal truth is God's eternal truth. They're not connected. But at the same time, when Christians in general want to be the place that you go to and you think highly of them, and you realize as a deconverting person, you're losing more and more respect for them every day. And every time they open their mouths, they sound more and more foolish. It's I don't think they realize what they're doing, but they're basically cutting themselves off, shooting themselves in the foot, as it were, and saying, I really I don't need to be a source of authority in your life anymore. And it gets to a point where they become their own laughing stock and you can't go back. Like once you see it, sort of like we say about mythology, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you see the ridiculousness of the Christian mindset and their thought process or lack thereof, like I can't unsee this. You all sound so foolish. You all sound so weak. You sound like you're so dependent on this system and you're not willing to embrace new information and you don't actually want the truth. You want the truth as your mommy and daddy gave it to you, as your pastor sold it to you. You want that truth. You have to have that party line. You're stuck in your system. You're a cog in the wheel, and you can't see that this was something that was done to you, and now you're in it and you're doing it to other people. You're stuck in a system, man. It's like, come on, and they can't see it or they won't see it or both. And once you see it, though, you're like, wow, like I can't go back. I can't go back to Christianity and I can't go back to church people. You all are not who I thought you were. You are not trustworthy people. You all look more and more like charlatans every day, you know?
I understand and I agree. I would say to sum it up, everything that you're saying is that I would explain it this way. In my journey, it was not about what is true. It was almost always about what to believe. They never said it was true. It's all about what to believe. There's a big difference. If I were to go to church today and ask them what's their business? What are they into? They're about salvation, not truth. Man, there's a big difference.
Yeah. World of difference. Well, in terms of just getting to sort of the conclusion, what has the journey been like on this side of it, in terms of especially healing from any religious trauma, just reclaiming your identity? What was it like in the first few weeks and months and at this point, years of saying, I am on the other side? Did you feel like you had some stuff to unwind, or did you already kind of do your grieving and unwinding while you were researching stuff? How did the journey to your new life, like, how did that evolve?
Well, first it started with community. Like I said, I met some very cool people, and then I started to become less of a hardcore proponent of trying to force people to see the impact of their beliefs because I came from Iraq. I came from a place where they were talking about in the book, but I'm meeting the people. Their lives are impacted by decisions that were made and that is influenced by beliefs. So by meeting people that kind of already knew what I discovered, I started to chill out more, learn some more. Christopher Hitchens, I'll never forget, died a few days before my birthday in 2011. And that really impacted me because like this guy was such just an amazing orator. And I went on to go to two of the Reason rallies in DC. I was able to go to the Atheist experience and just do a lot of cool things. And just been wonderful. And then, like I said, I'm so thankful that for Valerie for liking that post. It showed that you can be sincere and there is life after belief. There's people that will understand you, listen to you, cherish you. And so I'm much better now. And so I'm able to do a lot of the things that a lot of people don't think is possible, raise a family, just be normal. And I just think it's such a wonderful place to be that I really wish for more believers who are unafraid to be good, curious, sincere people and just embrace people for who they really are without letting religion get in the way. So it's been amazing.
Mm. With you mentioned your family. Uh, what is it like raising kids with a secular perspective, an atheist perspective, and how do you imagine what your life would have been like had you raised them as little Christians, little soldiers for Jesus? Like, but what is it like, knowing that that could have been your path, but isn't? How is raising them as a secular family going?
It's going great. I don't force anything on them. They know that their parents are atheists, but we don't tell them that they have to be like us. I don't even like, I don't say discuss it. They know by osmosis, if that makes sense. But, they know they can kind of choose their own path. The only thing that I would say that I wouldn't want for them is to like get into some kind of cultish type situation. Then I would like intervene. But besides that, if we can have that discussion, we will. But it's great because the kids are successful. They're good kids. They know about God, and they know that we can have that conversation should that interest them. In fact, I believe that actually educating people about religion is one of the best way to inoculate them from extreme type stuff. I'm pro education. I want to share. I want to talk to people. I still do talk to people about religion. So that's not a big deal. And it's been great so far. I have one in college, one in middle school, and my 9-year-old is all into video games and Fortnite, which is all normal for kids these days. So I'm just very fortunate and it shows that it's possible. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I do want to ask maybe if you could to uh, sort of two last questions, and then of course anything else that comes to your mind. But I did want to ask if you could to tell us more about the Haitian Freethinkers group, like how that's been going, sort of any success stories you've seen from that, your efforts there, and then just give a parting word to anybody that's going through the hardest parts of this. What would you say to somebody that's kind of confused as to I don't know where to go next? I know I've seen some stuff that I can't explain, and this seems like maybe Christianity has some cracks in it that I never saw, and its very foundation. It does seem very shaky and shifty, and I'm not sure, but I want to love Jesus, but I also know that there's some issues here, and I'm going to investigate. But right now, I'm kind of scared of where this goes, and then maybe hear someone like you or someone like me and think, yeah, this is a really scary journey. So, how is the Haitian Freethinkers group going, and what would you say to somebody going through the hardest parts of this journey?
Haitian freethinkers started when I wanted to find other Haitians who are secular people. When I was sitting with Amazing Randy at the Southeast Regional Meetup back in 2010, 2011, I said, something should be done. And I said, okay, well, I'll do something. That's how Haitian freethinkers kind of was inspired. And of course, Pat Robertson, because he said after the earthquake that it was a deal that was made with the devil that our ancestors did when we were trying to seek freedom from the French who were Christians. Uh, so very important. And so his terrible statement really inspired me to reach out to people to basically educate them if they didn't know, because I didn't know what they were taught because I had left Haiti for so long so long ago, I wasn't sure how many Haitians knew about plate tectonics. So if I could teach people that earthquakes are natural occurrences and it's not because deals were made with any devils, then I thought that would have been a success. So when I started Haitian Free Thinkers, I said, okay, if I can find 10 secular Haitians, it would be great. And I've surpassed that. So currently, it is a group on Facebook. It used to be public, but now it's restricted because of some of the issues that you know about people wanting to remain anonymous. But I welcome anybody. It's not just for Haitians. It's focused on Haitians because of the minority aspect. Just to kind of say, hey, it's always good to meet people who speak the language, who are familiar with the culture. So if you're interested, all you have to do is Google Haitian free thinkers. Everything you see is pretty much us or me. And we continue to do great things. My goal is to make Creole language stuff, hopefully to explain, why it is that we are secular or atheist. And the second part of the question for people that are struggling, I would say that everybody's track is different. You talked about your track, your experience, and everybody's experience is unique. So I would say first, it is okay. There are many people, and once upon a time, I used to listen to a podcast, not dreaming that I would meet your Aaron Ra of the world. We live close to each other. Maybe we'll meet, and it's kind of like this is part of the great journey. Like the world is much more digitized, and I've given support to people all over the world. Um, Even a kind word makes the difference. What I'm saying? Real people could need your support, and your support could be just existing to show that it's possible to share your story, to be authentic, to be even vulnerable, to be vulnerable, to say, this is what I'm struggling with right now, and for them to say, like, you know what, if he or she did it, I can do it. Most things that the other person, whoever sees this in the future, is going through, somebody's going through it. And there's a lot of organizations and people that are doing great work that if they could simply reach out, maybe you'll find something that you need. And that's what I think makes the community such a great place. And I would encourage anybody who hears this in the future to get that experience. So,
Mm, I love it. Yeah, and one of the groups that comes to mind is Recovering from Religion. I'm sure you know them, but their 800 number is always available for people to call. If you do have a lack of people you can talk to in your life about your journey, Recovering from Religion is there, and there's other community groups like the Facebook group that you do and others. But yeah, it's so critical for people to feel like they're not alone in this because it's such a weird journey when you're like your whole life is Christian, and then all of a sudden you're like, but I'm not part of that community anymore, but I don't have a new community yet. Where do I go? How do I take these first baby steps? And so to get plugged in as soon as you can is a big differentiator to your experience. But well, I do appreciate so much you sharing your story. I mean, honestly, it's so cool to hear your journey and to know that this at the end of the day, this is like we're all coming to some very similar conclusions, again, different paths, but just saying with more information, we can make better informed choices about this worldview and to conclude between the mythology and the horrific, morality of the Bible, the Old Testament, the Yahweh character with the genocide and all that. So many other issues we could weave in here. There's just a lot of reasons to rethink Christianity and to say, is this really what we thought it was? And at the end of the day, I'm obviously very, very convinced that there's not evidence that this is divine. And one of the biggest things that came to my mind at the very end of my experience was simply it looks so undivine that I just began asking myself sort of emotionally the question of like, God, is this really the best you could do? Is this the best you could do? Could you not do better than this? And it wasn't the main thought process that got me deconverted, but it was like an emotional thought process of just everything intellectually and rationally feels wrong about this worldview now. But emotionally, it just feels wrong because it feels like the God that I worship is beautiful. The God that I worship is amazing. He's brilliant. He's the God of the universe. He made everything, and then he wrote this really lame, silly book. Like that's really the best he could do. And I kind of had this just gap, like this void in my. We talk about the God shaped void. This Bible shaped void in my heart and my mind, saying, "Where is the real Bible? Where is the real Bible that's like actually a good book? It's like, oh wow, this is amazing. This is rational. This makes sense. This condemns slavery. This sounds like we're making sense of the world more and more." And I kind of felt like I was looking for this better Bible out there, and I just couldn't find it, and that's why obviously I left because it's the Bible of Christianity is not that Bible. But the more that you get to that point where you just say, I can't believe this stuff anymore. We're better than this. We're really better than this. It just slowly but surely those steps add up, and you eventually say, "There's just no way. There's no way that this worldview is an accurate representation of reality." And it is such a cool journey. I'm so glad to hear about your journey where you felt like your life got better and better as you were leaving. My journey was the same way. I had so much peace after I left. It's just crazy how much more peace I had because you realize the reason you didn't have peace when you were a Christian. I mean, you have like this facade of peace, but the reason you don't have real long lasting peace that's on all levels is because you can't, because it's a worldview that does not make sense. It's inconsistent. It's based on falsehoods. And you realize I was trying so hard to put a round puzzle piece in a square place. And it's like, it's never going to fit. It's never going to work. You are never going to be at peace in this world within Christianity because Christianity is just a man-made construct. It's just a system of control. And once you see it and you're like, yep, I'm out, your life changes and you realize, hopefully, if I've got some time left in my life, and hopefully we all do, hopefully I've got some time left, I can actually figure out who I am apart from this God stuff and rediscover life for the first time. It's like, I love that the Matrix illustration of opening up your eyes for the first time. Like, I've never seen the world for real ever before. And all of a sudden you have that chance and it's so beautiful, so beautiful. And you wish so much when I look at the Christians and they're just sure that they're sure that they're sure that it's real and that their God is real. He's on the throne. You just wish so much you could help them to see because I think to myself, you truly have been brainwashed. Like this, what this comes down to is you are in a permanently brainwashed state. And unless something shakes you up, you will spend the entire majority of your life, at least, you will be spending the majority of your life thinking this stuff is real, and you will never actually live a day of your life for real. You will always be a puppet, someone else's puppet, and you'll be parroting something that was written down thousands of years ago for no reason. It's you don't have to. It's irrelevant to your real life, but because the community told you it's important and they told you it's truth and real, you're stuck in it, and it just breaks my heart. It really it shatters me emotionally to think of the people that will never ever wake up. You know.
I understand and I agree.
Mm. Was there anything else I didn't ask about that you wanted to add to our discussion before we wrap up?
No, I think everything's been great. I just thank you for your time. And I just, as you said your last words, I'm thinking about, I think it was Mark Twain who said that it's harder to convince someone that they've been fooled than to fool them, or something to that nature. So yeah, Tristan's story shows that it is possible. No matter how long you've been in there, people, come out. And that's what I want to encourage whoever sees this and all your other wonderful videos to show that it is possible. I don't fault people. I try not to make people feel dumb or anything like that. It's just that we have different perspective. And if they care to listen, they'll see the reason of why we say what we're saying. And I just hope that more people discover that. So I really appreciate you for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Well said. It's a great perspective. And yeah, there's I try to remind myself too that some of this stuff it is going to make sense to some people that we love. It's just going to take time, and we just like we had to do it in our own season, our own schedule. Just they're going to have their own season and schedule as well for thinking through it. But I think what breaks my heart the most is the kids that are sort of they're caught in the middle. The kid, it's one thing for one individual to be like, I believe this stuff, and that's just I have the right to believe it. Like, yeah, you do. You have the right to believe it till the day you die. But I know that's not where it's gonna stop. You're gonna have to pass it on and indoctrinate children, and that's where it becomes very insidious and very abusive to me, and my heart's broken. I hope it ends in our society at some point, hopefully sooner rather than later.
I agree. That's why I'm a big proponent of education. I'm a big proponent of interacting with people, especially when people have different perspectives, and so hopefully that they don't have a misunderstanding of who we are. Because a lot of times, if we say that we're atheists, they start to tell you, like, oh, you believe that we came from nothing or we came from monkeys and all these things. It's like where are they getting this from? But that's just part of the battle with misinformation that I'm glad to be an ambassador for. That's why I love what I do, because I know that there's a lot of people that they just need to hear it directly from a real life person who knows what they're talking about. So yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for what you're doing for the Haitian community. I look forward to. I'm going to join that group and maybe brush up on my French a little bit as well. But I thank you so much for what you're doing. It's really important, and I appreciate your voice in the community. And I'll just wrap up today by saying we've been speaking with Reggie Beloved. Reggie, thank you so much. Great to hear your story. Great to get to know you. Look forward to doing it again sometime, and appreciate your time very much today.
all right, thank you, Tim.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.